Daniel Harper stood in the center of the grand archive of collective memory and tried not to feel overwhelmed. The building stretched higher than any skyscraper on Earth, its walls carved from a single piece of black stone that seemed to absorb light. Floating platforms carried visitors between levels, and holographic displays showed artifacts from civilizations that had died millions of years before humans learned to make fire. This section contains relics from the Third Galactic Era, Thelris said, his forearms gesturing at the displays around them. The Vendarian curator was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. He had been assigned to guide Daniel through the archive when the human delegation arrived 3 days ago. Most of these species felt in natural disasters or resource depletion. Very few civilizations survived their first 1,000 years of space travel. Daniel nodded, though his attention was fixed on a display case holding what looked like a musical instrument made from crystallized bone. The label beneath it was written in Galactic Standard, which Daniel had spent the last year learning. The instrument's creators had died out 60,000 years ago. Their whole civilization gone. Nothing left but this one beautiful thing in a case. Your people are fortunate, Thelris continued as they walked. Humans achieved space travel only 200 years ago, yet you have avoided the common pitfalls. No nuclear wars, no ecological collapse, no hive mind assimilation. The council was most impressed. We got lucky, Daniel said. He was an archaeologist and historian, not a diplomat, but he had been chosen for this mission because of his expertise in human cultural artifacts. Ambassador Lavra Martinez had warned him to be humble when speaking with aliens. Most species in the galaxy were thousands of years older than humanity. We nearly destroyed ourselves a few times. Thelris made a sound that might have been laughter. All species do. The fact that you stopped yourselves shows wisdom. Come, I want to show you the Lost Warrior culture's wing. I think you will find it fascinating. They took a floating platform up 17 levels. Daniel's stomach lurched as they rose through the open air. Nothing but a slight shimmer of energy between him and a fall that would take several minutes. When they stepped off, Daniel found himself in a long corridor aligned with weapons and battle standards. These civilizations all fell to warfare, Thelris explained. Either internal conflicts or conquest by neighbors. The Council keeps these artifacts as warnings. Advanced technology does not guarantee survival if a species cannot control its violent nature. Daniel walked slowly along the corridor, examining each display. There were energy weapons that still hummed with power after ages in storage. Armor made from materials he did not recognize. Battle standards marked with symbols that meant nothing to him. Each one represented a dead civilization, a people who had lost everything to war. He was halfway down the corridor when he saw it. Daniel stopped so suddenly that Thelris nearly walked into him. His breath caught in his throat. His hands started shaking. Daniel Harper? Is something wrong? The Vendarian asked. Daniel could not answer. He was staring at a display case that held a battle standard, a long piece of dark fabric mounted on a pole made of silver metal. On the fabric was a symbol in gold thread, a circle with a sword pointing upward, surrounded by 7 stars arranged in a specific pattern. It was his family crest. The exact same design that had been passed down through his family for as long as anyone could remember. The same symbol his grandmother had embroidered on a blanket when he was born. The same design on the ring he wore on his right hand. Daniel Harper? Thelris said again, concern in his voice. Daniel forced himself to breathe. He stepped closer to the display case, his eyes scanning the label beneath the artifact. The text was in several languages, including Galactic Standard. Battle, Standard of the Guardian Fleet, Terran Protectorate. Age, approximately 47,000 standard years. Origin, unknown. Last known location, Sector 7 Alpha, 3rd Planetary System. Status of civilization: extinct, cause unknown. These warriors served as peacekeepers during the Fifth Galactic Era until their sudden disappearance from all records. No trace of their worlds or people has been found. Daniel read the label 3 times. His mind felt like it was breaking apart and reassembling itself. Terran. That meant Earth. That meant human. But humans had not been in space 47,000 years ago. 47,000 years ago, humans were living in caves and learning to hunt with spears. The oldest human civilization on record was maybe 6,000 years old. Earth's written history only went back a few thousand years. This made no sense. "You recognize this symbol," Thelris said. It was not a question. The Vendarian was watching Daniel with those large dark eyes. Reading his reaction, Daniel pulled out his phone with trembling hands. He opened his photo gallery and found a picture of his grandmother's blanket. He held the phone up next to the display case. The symbols matched perfectly. Every detail. The angle of the sword. The position of the 7 stars. Even the style of the circle was identical. "This is my family crest," Daniel said quietly. "This exact symbol has been in my family for hundreds of years. My grandmother said it was passed down from her grandmother, and before that, as far back as anyone knew." Thelris stepped closer to the display. His forearms crossed over his chest, a gesture Daniel had learned meant deep thought in Vendarian culture. That should not be possible. This artifact predates human civilization by 40,000 years. I know. Daniel took several photos of the display from different angles. His hands were still shaking. "Can you tell me more about the Terran Protectorate? Are there other artifacts? Records? Anything?" The Vendarian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. "There are records. Extensive records. But they are sealed in the Forbidden's archives. Access requires special clearance from the Council. I need to see them." Daniel looked at Thelris directly. "If my family is connected to this, if humans are connected to this, I have a right to know. The Council does not grant access to the Forbidden's archives easily. Some knowledge is restricted for good reason. Why? What happened to the Terran Protectorate?" Thelris looked at the battle standard, then back at Daniel. "They disappeared. Not just their people, but their planets, their ships, everything. One cycle, they controlled hundreds of systems. The next cycle, they were gone. No distress signals, no debris fields, no evidence of what happened. For 47,000 years, they have been one of the galaxy's greatest mysteries." Daniel felt cold, despite the comfortable temperature of the archive. And now a human shows up wearing their symbol. Yes. They stood in silence for several minutes. Daniel stared at the battle standard and tried to make sense of what he was seeing. His family was not special. They were farmers and teachers and workers. His grandmother had told him stories about their ancestors being protectors, guardians of something important, but he had always thought those were just fairy tales. Old stories to make children feel important. "I need to request formal access to those archives," Daniel said finally. "Through Ambassador Martinez. This is too important to ignore." Thelris nodded slowly. "I will help you make the request. But Daniel Harper, I must warn you. The Terran Protectorate is a sensitive subject in the galaxy. Some species believe they will return one day. Others fear that return. If you are connected to them, your life may become very complicated." Daniel looked at the battle standard one more time. The symbol that had been in his family for generations. The symbol of an ancient human civilization that should not exist. "I think my life just became complicated no matter what I do," he said. Daniel did not sleep that night. He sat in his quarters at the human delegation building, staring at the photos on his phone. The battle standard. Label. His family crest. He kept hoping he had made a mistake, that the symbols were only similar, not identical. But every time he compared them, they matched perfectly dot at dot. He went to find Ambassador Laura Martinez. She was already awake, reviewing reports in her office. When Daniel showed her the photos, she set down her coffee and leaned forward. "Are you absolutely certain this is your family symbol?" she asked. 100%. Look. Daniel showed her more photos from his phone. Pictures of his grandmother's blanket. An old painting of his great-great-grandfather wearing a coat with the symbol embroidered on the shoulder. A photograph of his grandmother's grandmother, taken in the early 1900s, standing next to a banner with the same design. This has been in my family for at least 200 years of documented history. Probably longer. Laura studied the images in silence. Then she looked at the photo of the battle standard. 47,000 years old. That's impossible. I know. Humans were barely using tools that long ago. I know. Laura sat back in her chair. She was quiet for a long time, thinking. Daniel had worked with her for over a year, preparing for this diplomatic mission. He knew that expression. She was calculating political consequences. If this gets out, she said slowly, it will change everything. The other species already watch us carefully because we're new to the galactic community. If they think we're connected to some ancient warrior civilization, they might see us as a threat. Or they might finally explain why humans are so different, Daniel said. Laura, every other species in the galaxy evolved naturally on their homeworld. They have clear evolutionary paths. But human evolution has gaps that scientists can't explain. Sudden jumps in capability that don't match natural selection. What if there's a reason for that? You think humans aren't native to Earth? I think we need to find out what happened to the Terran Protectorate. Laura nodded. I'll request access to the archives through official channels. But Daniel, this might take weeks. The Vendarian Council doesn't move quickly on sensitive matters. Kevin Brooks arrived at the office an hour later. He was the security officer assigned to protect the human delegation, a former military man who took his job seriously. When Daniel explained what he had found, Kevin's expression darkened. Ancient human warriors who disappeared mysteriously, Kevin said. That's either the best news or the worst news I've heard in my career. Why worse news? Daniel asked. Because if they disappeared, something made them disappear. Something powerful enough to erase an entire civilization from the galaxy. If humans are connected to them, that something might come looking for us eventually. The thought had not occurred to Daniel. He had been so focused on the mystery of his family crest that he had not considered the implications. What could destroy a civilization so completely that no trace remained? Ambassador Martinez sent the formal request to the Vendarian Council that afternoon. The response came back within hours. Denied. No explanation. Given Daniel spent the next 3 days trying different approaches. He requested access as an archaeologist. Denied. He requested access as a historian studying human origins. Denied. He even tried requesting access to just the index of the archives to see what topics were covered. Denied. On the 4th day, Thelrus came to visit him. The Vendarian curator looked uncomfortable, his forearms fidgeting with the edges of his robes. I should not be here, he said quietly. But I have been thinking about your discovery, about your family symbol. Have you learned something? Daniel asked. I have been researching the Terran Protectorate in the public archives. The information is limited, but there are some things I can tell you. Thelrus glanced around, making sure they were alone. The Terran Protectorate was one of the most powerful civilizations in galactic history. They controlled hundreds of systems. Their ships were faster than anything else in space. Their warriors were unstoppable. What did they do? Conquer other species? No, that is what makes them unusual. They were protectors, peacekeepers. When younger species faced extinction threats, Natural disasters, hostile invasions, the Terran Protectorate would intervene. They saved dozens of civilizations from extinction. Daniel felt a strange sensation in his chest. His grandmother had always said their family were guardians, protectors of something important. He had thought it was just a story. What happened to them? He asked. No one knows. The records from that era are incomplete. What we do know is that the Protectorate had a civil war, a disagreement about their role in the galaxy. One faction believed they should not interfere in other species' development. The other faction believed they had a duty to protect weaker civilizations. The war lasted for decades and devastated both sides. Who won? Neither side. The Protectorate collapsed, and then they disappeared completely. Some scholars believe the survivors fled to primitive worlds and abandoned their technology. They wanted to start over, to forget what they had done to each other. Daniel's mind was racing. Earth. You think some of them came to Earth? I think it is possible. Earth is a harsh world by galactic standards. Strong gravity, dangerous weather, aggressive predators. Most species could not survive there naturally. But if the Terrans were already adapted to such conditions, it would be a good place to hide. But that was 47,000 years ago. Even if some of them settled on Earth, we would have evolved. Changed. We wouldn't still have their symbols. Thalris was quiet for a moment. Unless the symbols were important. Unless they were part of a promise. A way to remember who they were and what they stood for, even after everything else was forgotten. Daniel pulled out his phone and looked at the photo of his grandmother. She was holding the blanket with the family crest, smiling at the camera. She had died 5 years ago, but he could still hear her voice telling him the old stories. Your ancestors were guardians, Daniel. They stood between the darkness and the light. One day, you might understand what that means. The Vendarian Council knows more than they're telling us, Daniel said. Why won't they share this information? Thalris looked uncomfortable again. I should not say this, but you deserve to know the truth. The Council is afraid. Of what? Of what your presence here means. For 47,000 years, the Terran Protectorate has been gone. Their enemies, the threats they fought against, have been quiet. But 3 weeks ago, deep space monitoring stations detected strange energy signatures. The same signatures that appear in the old records from the Protectorate era. Daniel felt cold. What kind of signatures? The kind associated with the Void Collective. Who are they? The ancient enemies of the Terran Protectorate. The threat that nearly destroyed them. If the Void Collective is returning, and if humans are connected to the Protectorate, then perhaps your arrival here is not a coincidence. You think the Council brought humans to the archive, hoping we would recognize something? Hoping we would know what to do? I think the Council is desperate. And desperate people do things they would not normally do. Daniel stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see the spires of Vendarian cities stretching toward the sky. Alien ships moving through the air. A whole civilization, thousands of years old, afraid of something from ancient history. I need to see those archives, he said firmly. I need to know what my ancestors faced. If this Void Collective is real, if they're coming back, we need to be prepared. The Council will not grant access easily. That'll make them listen. Lavra can request an emergency session. I'll tell them everything. About my family crest, about my grandmother's stories, about the connection. If they're looking for answers, maybe I can provide them. Thalris nodded slowly. I will support your request. I believe you have a right to know your own history. 2 days later, the Vendarian Council convened in their great chamber. Daniel stood before them, surrounded by representatives from 40 different species. Lavra stood beside him, along with Kevin and the rest of the human delegation. Daniel showed them the photos. He explained his family history. He told them about his grandmother's stories. When he finished, the chamber was silent. Finally, the council leader spoke. She was an elder Vendurian, her skin faded to almost white with age. Your request is unusual. The Forbidden's archives are sealed for good reasons. Knowledge can be dangerous. More dangerous than ignorance? Daniel asked. If my people are connected to the Terran Protectorate, we have a right to know. And if the Void Collective is returning, don't we need every piece of information we can find? The council leader looked at Daniel for a long time. Then she conferred with the other representatives in a language Daniel did not understand. We will grant you limited access, she said finally. You may enter the Forbidden's archives with Curator Thelris as your escort. But you may not remove any materials. You may not record anything. You may only observe. Do you accept these terms? I accept, Daniel said. The Forbidden's archives were located deep beneath the Grand Archive, down passages that grew darker and colder with each level. Daniel and Thelris descended in silence, the only sound their footsteps echoing off stone walls. The air tasted old, like breathing in history itself. Few people have seen this place, Thelris said, as they reached a massive door carved with symbols Daniel did not recognize. The council guards these records carefully. Some knowledge is too dangerous for general access. The door opened when Thelris placed his hand against it. Beyond was a chamber so vast Daniel could not see the far walls. Rows of storage units stretched into the darkness, each one marked with lights that pulsed in different colors. The red section contains records of extinct civilizations, Thelris explained. The blue section holds information about dangerous technologies. The green section is cultural archives. We are looking for yellow. Historical records from the 5th Galactic era. They walked between the rows until they found the yellow markers. Thelris stopped at a storage unit that was larger than the others. The label on it read simply, Terran Protectorate. This entire unit? Daniel asked, staring at the size of it. This is all about the Protectorate? They were an important civilization. Their impact on the galaxy was significant. Thelris activated the storage unit. A holographic display appeared in the air, showing an index of files. Thousands of them. Where would you like to begin? Daniel scanned the list. Most of the entries were in languages he did not understand, but some had been translated to Galactic Standard. He saw files labeled Fleet Movements, Diplomatic Records, Technology Archives, Cultural Studies. One file caught his attention, Origins and Settlement. Start with that one, he said. Thelris opened the file. Text and images filled the air around them. Daniel began reading, and with each paragraph, his understanding of human history crumbled. The Terran Protectorate had not originated on Earth. They had come from a world called Terra Prime, located in what was now empty space. That world had been destroyed in a cosmic disaster 15,000 years before the Protectorate disappeared. The survivors had spread across the galaxy, establishing colonies on dozens of worlds. Earth had been one of those colonies. A small outpost barely documented in the official records. It was valued not for resources, but for its harsh conditions. The Terrans trained their warriors there, teaching them to survive in high gravity and dangerous environments. We were always from Earth, Daniel whispered. Just not the way we thought. Keep reading, Thelris said quietly. Daniel found the section about the Civil War. It had started over a simple question. Should the Protectorate intervene when they saw other species heading toward extinction? One faction, called the Preservers, believed in non-interference. They argued that each species must find their own path, even if that path led to destruction. Interfering would make other civilizations dependent, weak. It would prevent them from growing. The other faction, called the Guardians, believed they had a moral duty to help. They had the power to save lives, to prevent suffering. Refusing to act when they could make a difference was the same as causing harm themselves. The debate became heated. Then it became violent. The Terran Protectorate tore itself apart over this disagreement. Worlds burned. Fleets fought each other. Families were divided. Daniel found himself reading about a specific battle. The Battle of 7 Stars. Guardian Fleet Commander Nathaniel Harper had led his forces against a preserver armada to protect a colony of young species threatened by a natural disaster. The battle had lasted 3 days. Harper had won, but at terrible cost. Half his fleet was destroyed. Thousands dead. Daniel stopped reading. Harper. My family name. I noticed, Thelris said. There was an image attached to the file. A portrait of Commander Nathaniel Harper. The man looked like he could be Daniel's older brother. Same face shape. Same eyes. Even the same expression Daniel saw when he looked in the mirror. This is my ancestor, Daniel said. This has to be. He kept reading. After the battle, Commander Harper had made a speech to his surviving crews. The text was preserved in the archives. We did not start this war. We did not want this destruction. But we made a choice. We chose to stand between the darkness and the light. We chose to protect those who cannot protect themselves, even if it costs us everything, even if our own people call us traitors. This is the oath of the Guardian Fleet. We stand watch until the last star fades. Daniel felt dizzy. Those words. His grandmother had spoken almost the same words when she told him about their family. She had been passing down something real, something that survived 47,000 years. There is more, Thelris said, opening another file. This explains what happened after the war. Both sides had been devastated. The Terran Protectorate had collapsed. The survivors faced a choice. Continue fighting or find a new path. The Guardian Fleet had made a decision. They would scatter. They would go to the most primitive of their colony worlds and start over. They would abandon their technology, their ships, their weapons. They would become simple people living simple lives. But they made one promise. If the galaxy ever faced an extinction-level threat again, if the darkness returned, the Guardian bloodlines would answer the call. They would remember who they were. They would take up their duty once more. To ensure this promise was kept. The Guardian Fleet had encoded certain information into their genetic structure. Memories, skills, knowledge. These would remain dormant for generations, awakening only when needed. The symbol of the Guardian Fleet, the crest of 7 stars and a sword, was to be preserved by each bloodline. A reminder of the oath. A way to identify true descendants when the time came. Daniel touched his family ring unconsciously. 7 stars and a sword. He was wearing the proof of his heritage. How many Guardian bloodlines were there? He asked. Thelris checked the records. Approximately 300 commanders scattered to different worlds. Earth received 7 bloodline families. Are there records of what worlds they went to? Some, but many of the colony worlds were destroyed or abandoned in the millennia since. Earth is one of the few that still exists. Daniel opened another file, this one labeled Threat Assessment, Void Collective. What he read made his blood run cold. The Void Collective was not a normal civilization. They were something else. Something that existed in the space between stars and the darkness itself. They consumed energy, resources, life. They had no diplomacy, no communication. They simply expanded, destroying everything in their path. The Terran Protectorate had fought them for centuries. Every time the Void Collective was pushed back, they would retreat into deep space. Then, generations later, they would return. The last encounter had been during the Civil War. The Void Collective had taken advantage of the Protectorate's division, attacking while the Terrans fought among themselves. It had taken both factions working together to drive them back. After that battle, The Void Collective had disappeared. No sightings for 47,000 years, until 3 weeks ago. The Council detected them returning, Daniel said, understanding now. That's why they invited humans to visit the archive. They were hoping someone would recognize the Guardian symbols. They were hoping the bloodline still existed. Yes, Taurus said. The Council has been preparing quietly, building fleets, strengthening defenses. But the Void Collective destroyed civilizations far more advanced than what exists now. Without the Terran Protectorate, the galaxy may not survive. Daniel looked at the portrait of Commander Nathaniel Harper, his ancestor, a man who had lived 47,000 years ago, but shared his face, his name, his blood. The genetic encoding, Daniel said. The memories and skills hidden in Guardian bloodlines. How do they activate? Thelris opened another file. According to these records, contact with Protectorate technology triggers the activation. Touching an artifact, entering a facility, accessing a ship. The technology recognizes the genetic markers and begins the awakening process. Daniel remembered touching the display case when he first saw the battle standard. He had felt something then, a strange sensation like electricity running through his body. He had thought it was just emotion. I need to find a Protectorate facility, he said. If there are weapons, ships, anything that could help fight the Void Collective, we need to recover them. The records show several hidden facilities, Thelris said, pulling up a star map. Most are in deep space, far from inhabited systems. This was intentional. The Guardians did not want their weapons found by accident. One location on the map pulsed brighter than the others. It was marked with the 7-star symbol. What's special about that one? Daniel asked. That is the Guardian Reserve, the main storage facility for the Guardian fleet. According to these records, it contains preserved ships, weapons, and most importantly, the training archives. Everything needed to rebuild the Guardian fleet. Where is it? In a system now designated as uninhabited. A small moon orbiting a gas giant. The facility is buried deep underground. It has been dormant for 47,000 years, waiting for a Guardian bloodline to return. Daniel studied the coordinates. The system was several weeks' travel from Vendarian space. Will the Council allow an expedition? I do not know. They are afraid of awakening things that should stay buried. But I think they are. The Vendarian Council chamber was filled with tension. Representatives from 40 species sat in their designated sections, all eyes on Daniel as he presented his findings. Ambassador Laura Martinez stood beside him, her expression carefully neutral, while Kevin Brooks watched from the security section. Daniel had prepared a detailed report, but he knew the real argument would come down to one simple fact. Somewhere in deep space was a facility full of ancient weapons, and he wanted permission to activate them. The Guardian Reserve represents our best chance against the Void Collective, Daniel said, his voice steady despite his nerves. The Terran Protectorate fought these things for centuries. They knew how to defeat them. That knowledge is waiting for us. The Krell representative, a heavy-set being covered in thick plates, spoke up. You ask us to trust that ancient weapons will still function after 47,000 years. That is a dangerous assumption. The archives indicate the Protectorate technology was designed to last, Thelris added from his position near Daniel. Their facilities were built to remain operational for millions of years if necessary, and we simply allow humans to access this technology. Another representative, a floating creature that communicated through light patterns, flickered in agitation. These are the descendants of the most powerful warrior civilization in history. What guarantee do we have that they will not use these weapons against us? Laura stepped forward. The Guardian fleet's entire purpose was protection, not conquest. The historical records are clear on this. They sacrificed everything to save other species. 47,000 years ago. Times change. People change. Daniel felt frustration building in his chest. They were wasting time arguing while the Void Collective drew closer. But he forced himself to stay calm. I understand your concerns. But right now, we're facing a threat that nearly destroyed the entire galaxy. We need to at least investigate what resources are available. The council leader raised one hand for silence. We will vote on authorizing an expedition. But there will be conditions. Daniel Harper may travel to the Guardian Reserve, but he will be accompanied by a multi-species observation team. Any technology recovered must be reviewed by council experts before use. And if the facility proves too dangerous, it will be sealed permanently. I accept those conditions, Daniel said. The vote took an hour. When it finished, the expedition was approved by a narrow margin. Daniel felt relief wash over him, but also apprehension. He was about to activate technology that had been dormant since before human civilization existed. The expedition ship departed 3 days later. It was a Vendarian vessel, fast and well-equipped. Besides Daniel, the crew included Kevin Brooks, Thelris, and 5 other specialists from different species. An engineer, a military strategist, a technology expert, a medical officer, and a council observer whose job was to make sure nothing went wrong. The journey took 2 weeks. Daniel spent most of that time reading everything Thelris could provide about the Guardian fleet. He learned their tactics, their philosophy, their history. The more he read, the more he felt a strange sense of familiarity. These were not alien concepts to him. They felt right. Natural. On the 10th day of the journey, Daniel experienced his first vision. He was standing on the bridge when suddenly he was somewhere else. Another ship. Another time. He could see through someone else's eyes, feel their thoughts. Commander Harper stood on the bridge of the Guardian flagship, watching enemy vessels approach. He knew what he had to do. Protect the colony below, no matter the cost. His crew looked to him for orders, and he gave them without hesitation. The battle plan formed in his mind fully developed, as if he had fought this engagement 1,000 times before. Daniel gasped and found himself back on the Vendarian ship. Kevin was gripping his arm, concern on his face. "You zoned out for a minute there," Kevin said. "Are you all right?" "I saw something. A memory, but not mine." Daniel sat down, his hands shaking. "The genetic encoding. It's starting." The medical officer, a Kesh named Velana, scanned him with her instruments. "Your neural activity is elevated. There are patterns I do not recognize. It is as if your brain is accessing information stored in your DNA." "The Guardian bloodlines," Thelris said quietly. "The awakening has begun." Over the next few days, the visions came more frequently. Daniel saw battles fought in ancient times. He felt the weight of command decisions. He learned tactics and strategies that no modern human had ever known. Each vision left him exhausted, but also more capable. Skills were downloading into his mind. Lara contacted him via communication link from Earth. "The Council is sending me regular updates. They're concerned about what's happening to you." "I'm concerned too," Daniel admitted. "But I think this is necessary. If we're going to use the Guardian technology, someone needs to know how it works. The other Guardian bloodlines on Earth are being contacted. We're trying to find them. If the genetic awakening is real, they might be experiencing the same thing you are. How many have we found?" 3 families so far. The problem is that 47,000 years is a long time. Many bloodlines probably died out. Others mix so much with the general population that the genetic markers are diluted. Daniel understood. His own family had been lucky. They had kept records, maintained traditions, preserved the Crest. Most families would not have been so careful. When they finally reached the system, Daniel stood on the bridge and stared at the view screen. The gas giant dominated the view, its swirling clouds colored in shades of orange and red. 3 moons orbited the planet. The middle moon was their target. Scanning for artificial structures, the engineer said, operating her instruments. After a moment, she looked up in surprise. I am detecting massive underground construction. The facility extends several kilometers below the surface. Any power signatures? Kevin asked. The entire facility is in standby mode, but there are power cells still active. After 47,000 years, that should be impossible. Thalris looked at Daniel. Protectorate technology. It lasts. They took a shuttle down to the moon's surface. The landing site was barren, just gray rock and dust under a black sky. But when Daniel stepped out of the shuttle, he felt something. A pull. A recognition. This way, he said, walking toward what looked like a natural rock formation dot as he approached. The rock shimmered and disappeared. It had been a holographic projection. Beneath it was a door, smooth metal marked with the 7-star symbol. Daniel placed his hand on the symbol. For a moment, nothing happened. Then light flooded through the metal, spreading out from his touch. The door responded to his genetic signature. A voice spoke in a language Daniel should not have understood, but did. Ancient Terran. Genetic pattern recognized. Guardian bloodline confirmed. Commander access granted. Welcome home, Guardian. You have been away for a long time. The door opened, revealing a passage that sloped downward into darkness. Lights activated as they entered, illuminating walls carved with symbols and text. Daniel read them easily, another skill unlocked by the genetic awakening. They descended for what felt like hours. The passage led them through security checkpoints that opened at Daniel's touch. Past storage chambers filled with equipment. Past barracks and training rooms. Past archives and laboratories. Finally, they reached the central chamber. It was vast, carved from solid rock. And it was filled with ships, dozens of them. Sleek vessels marked with the Guardian symbol, each one perfectly preserved. They sat in neat rows, waiting. Their hulls gleamed as if they had been built yesterday instead of millennia ago. This is impossible, the engineer whispered. These ships should have degraded to dust by now. Protectorate technology, Thalris repeated. They built things to last. At the center of the chamber stood a platform with a holographic interface. Daniel approached it, and the interface activated. A face appeared in the hologram. Female, human, with kind eyes and an expression of infinite patience. She wore the uniform of a Guardian fleet commander. Greetings, Guardian. I am the facility artificial intelligence. You may call me Guardian Prime. I have been waiting for a bloodline to return. The wait has been long, but I am patient. I was designed to be patient. Daniel found his voice. How long have you been waiting? 47,312 years, roughly. My chronometer has a margin of error after so much time. You've been alone here for all that time? Not alone. I have the memory of those who built me. I have the purpose they gave me. I wait for Guardians to return. I wait to serve again. Why did they leave? Why abandon all this? Guardian Prime's expression became sad. The Civil War broke the Protectorate. Those who survived chose different paths. Some preservers fled to distant galaxies, believing the home galaxy was corrupted. The Guardians scattered to primitive worlds, hoping to find peace. But before they left, they made this place a reserve, a last hope. If the darkness ever returned, if the ancient enemy ever woke again, the Guardian bloodlines would come back. They would remember. They would fight. The Void Collective is returning, Daniel said. I know. My sensors detected their energy signatures 6 weeks ago. The countdown has begun. The galaxy is perhaps 6 months before they reach inhabited space. Without the Guardian fleet, the current civilizations will fall. They do not have the weapons or knowledge to fight. The message reached Earth 2 days later. Daniel's genetic template, the specifications for testing, and a simple request. We need Guardians. We need them now. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Billions of humans volunteered to be tested. The genetic markers Guardian Prime had described were rare, but humanity's population was vast. Within 2 weeks, they had found over 15,000 people with enough Guardian heritage to be viable candidates. Some were direct bloodline descendants who had never known their heritage. Others carried diluted markers, genetic echoes from ancestors who had mixed with the general population over thousands of years. The markers were weak in most of them, but Guardian Prime's genetic enhancement therapy could strengthen them. Daniel spent those weeks at the facility, training. Guardian Prime taught him everything. Ship operations, weapons systems, tactical doctrine, battle strategy. He practiced in simulators that made him feel like he was actually flying through space, engaging enemy targets. The genetic awakening continued too. More visions, more memories. He dreamed of battles fought before Earth had cities. He woke up knowing things he had never learned. How to read enemy fleet movements. How to coordinate multiple ships in combat. How to make the hard decisions that commanders faced. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. Kevin Brooks was the first non-bloodline human to arrive at the facility. He had tested positive for diluted markers and volunteered immediately. Guardian Prime administered the enhancement therapy, strengthening his genetic connection to the Guardian heritage. "This feels weird," Kevin said as the therapy completed. "Like something in my brain just woke up." "That's exactly what happened," Guardian Prime explained. "Your dormant genetic memory is activating. It will take several days for full integration, but you should begin experiencing skill downloads soon." More volunteers arrived every day. Transport ships brought them from Earth in groups of 50 or more. Guardian Prime created training programs tailored to each person's marker strength. Those with the strongest markers trained as ship commanders. Those with weaker markers learned support roles, navigation, weapons operations, engineering. The facility transformed from a tomb into a hive of activity. Humans filled the barracks. Ships were taken out of storage and prepared for flight. The ancient weapons hummed to life after millennia of silence. Ambassador Martinez arrived in the 3rd week with news from the Vendarian Council. They're terrified and hopeful in equal measure. Terrified of what might happen if humans gain access to this much military power. Hopeful because the Void Collective is getting closer and they don't have any better options. "What's the current projection?" Daniel asked. 4 months until the Void Collective reaches inhabited space. Maybe less. Their speed is increasing. Daniel looked at the training floor below, where hundreds of humans practiced in simulators. "We need more time." "We don't have it." "The Council is requesting that you deploy whatever forces you can as soon as possible. They want the Guardian fleet to establish a defensive perimeter." "We're not ready." "These people have been training for weeks, not years. The original Guardian fleet trained for decades. Then we work with what we have." "Daniel, you're the closest thing to a fully awakened Guardian we've got. Guardian Prime says your genetic activation is 90% complete. The tactical knowledge is there. You just need to trust it." Daniel closed his eyes. She was right. When he let himself stop thinking and just react, the knowledge was there. Battle plans formed in his mind, fully developed. He could see fleet movements in his head like pieces on a board. It was not him. Not entirely. It was Commander Nathaniel Harper, his ancestor from 47,000 years ago, living again through genetic memory. "How many ships can we deploy?" he asked. Guardian Prime says we have 30 vessels in flyable condition. More can be prepared, but it will take time. 30 ships against the Void Collective. That's suicide. It's what we have. Daniel thought about the battle records he had studied. The Terran Protectorate had fought the Void Collective for centuries with hundreds of ships and still barely held them off. 30 ships was nothing, but 30 Guardian ships were not normal ships. He made his decision. Start selecting our best trained people. Commanders for 30 vessels, full crews for each one. We deploy in 1 week. That week was a blur of final preparations. Daniel worked with Guardian Prime to select ship commanders based on their genetic activation levels and training performance. Kevin Brooks was given command of a vessel. So were 3 direct bloodline descendants who had shown exceptional skill. The rest of the commanders were diluted marker volunteers who had taken to the training with natural talent. The genetic enhancement therapy had worked better on some than others. Not everyone could reach the level of a true bloodline guardian, but they were close enough. The Vendarian Council provided support ships and supplies. Other species contributed what they could. It was not enough, but it was something. On the day of deployment, Daniel stood in the hangar bay and looked at the 30 ships ready for launch. Each one bore the 7-star symbol. Each one carried a crew of humans who had volunteered to fight an enemy they barely understood. I won't lie to you, Daniel said, addressing the assembled crews over the communication system. We're facing something that nearly destroyed the most advanced civilization in history. We're outmatched in every way. Numbers, experience, technology. The Void Collective has been doing this for millions of years. We've been training for weeks. He paused, looking at their faces. Young and old. People from every part of Earth. Different backgrounds, different beliefs, united by a common cause. But we have something they don't. We have a reason to fight. Every species in the galaxy is counting on us. Every world, every family, every child. The Guardian Oath says we stand between the darkness and the light. Today, we honor that oath. Today, we become what our ancestors were. Protectors, defenders, guardians. The crews boarded their ships. Daniel took his place on the command deck of the flagship. A vessel Guardian Prime had named Eternal Watch. The name felt right. All ships report ready. Kevin's voice came over the communication. Channel. Then let's go remind the galaxy what Guardians can do. Daniel said that the Guardian fleet launched from the facility for the first time in 47,000 years. 30 ships rising into the black. It felt like a miracle and a terrible risk all at once. They established their defensive perimeter at the edge of inhabited space, where the Void Collective would first emerge from deep space. The Vendarian Council had positioned conventional fleets nearby, but everyone knew those fleets would be secondary. The real fight would be Guardian against Void. They did not have to wait long. 3 weeks after deployment, the sensors detected them. Void Collective vessels emerging from the darkness, like nightmares given form. They were not ships in the traditional sense. They were organic and mechanical combined, constantly shifting, adapting. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. Daniel felt his genetic knowledge activate. He knew these enemies. The memories in his blood remembered them. He knew their tactics, their weapons, their weaknesses. All ships, battle formation Epsilon, he ordered. His voice was calm despite the fear in his chest. Remember your training. Trust your instincts. And trust each other. The Guardian ships moved into position with a grace that surprised even Daniel. The crews were responding to their genetic knowledge without thinking. It was working exactly as Guardian Prime had said it would. The Void Collective attacked. Their weapons tore through space with destructive power that made conventional defenses useless. But the Guardian ships were not conventional. Daniel's hands moved across his controls, and his ship responded instantly. Dodge, counter, fire. The patterns were in his blood. Around him, the other Guardian ships moved in perfect coordination. They fought not as individuals, but as a unit, each ship supporting the others. The battle lasted 7 hours. The longest 7 hours of Daniel's life. Ships were damaged. Crews were injured. But the Guardian fleet held the line. When the Void Collective finally retreated, Daniel could hardly believe it. They had survived. More than that, they had won. "Damage report," he called out. Kevin's voice came back. "We took hits, but nothing critical. No ships lost. A few injuries. Nothing life-threatening. The Void Collective is withdrawing," another commander reported. "Long-range sensors show them pulling back to deep space." Daniel felt the tension drain from his body. They had done it. 30 ships against hundreds, and they had held. But this was just the first battle. The Void Collective would be back, stronger next time. This war was far from over. Over the following months, the pattern repeated. The Void Collective would attack. The Guardian fleet would defend. Each time, both sides learned from the previous engagement. Daniel felt himself changing with each battle. The genetic memories integrated more fully. He was not just himself anymore. He was Commander Nathaniel Harper, living again. He was every Guardian who had ever fought this enemy. Their knowledge, their experience, their courage, all flowing through him. More Guardian ships were brought online as more volunteers completed their training. The fleet grew to 50 ships, then 70, then 100. Earth was fully committed now. The entire planet had mobilized to support the Guardian fleet.